All right. I've been asked to project my voice. Hopefully you can all hear me. I can't even hear myself. So we're going to talk about AI. I'm going to give you a different way of thinking about AI today than what we hear on LinkedIn. I'm also going to talk about the macro impact that these technologies are going to have on society. So we're going to get quite philosophical. I've been involved in AI for about 25 years. My undergraduate PhD postdocs were in AI from UCL. I started the company about 18 years ago that's been building AI solutions for large companies. I sold that to WPP 4 years ago, where I now run AI across the business, and I've just started a company to try to solve machine consciousness. So if we're going to go very deep, we can today. Okay, that's me, it's boring. Let's talk about AI. So I guess for the past 10 years, companies have been getting very excited about data. They've been building data lakes, putting Tableau on top, hiring data scientists, machine learning experts, and hoping that by extracting insights from data and giving those insights to human beings, that it will lead to better decisions. If I'm honest with you, giving human beings better insights doesn't lead to better decisions. Companies don't have insight problems, they have decision-making problems. And actually, there's lots of books out there to convince you that humans are not very good at decision-making. I don't have time to convince you today, but I promise you we're not. Always start with a decision first and work backwards. If I build a system that I give data to and it makes a decision, and tomorrow I give the same data, it makes the same decision, what I have is automation. And automation is amazing because we can get computers to do things better than human beings. But does anybody know the definition of stupidity? Doing the same thing over again and expecting a different answer. I would controversially argue that by definition, automation is stupid. It's not AI. I know that everybody that currently touches these words calls themselves an AI company. It's fine. We get more clients. We get more funding. There are unfortunately many definitions of AI. The most popular definition is the weakest definition, which is getting computers to do things that humans can do. Over the past 3 years, because of ChatGPT, we can correspond with computers in natural language. We can get computers to recognize objects and images. And when we get machines to behave like humans, because humans are the most intelligent thing we know in the universe, we assume that that's intelligence. Again, humans are not that intelligent. That's a different conversation. There's a much better definition of AI that comes from a definition of intelligence. Instead of using human beings as a pinnacle of intelligence, there's this definition from the 80s, which is goal-directed adaptive behavior. It's a beautiful definition. Goal-directed in the sense I'm trying to route my vehicles to maximize deliveries. I'm trying to allocate my workforce to maximize happiness. I'm trying to spend my marketing money to maximize return. Behavior is how quickly I can move towards that goal. And I don't, again, have time to convince you of this, but if you choose the wrong algorithm, if you choose the wrong method, then on the one hand, it will literally take longer than the age of the universe to solve that problem. On the other hand, it can take milliseconds. The opportunity cost in choosing the wrong algorithm is between longer than the age of the universe and milliseconds. We'll talk about this later on. Anyway, before I give you a different framework to think about AI, because I don't like to think about AI through definitions and technologies, I think of AI through applications. Before I give you a different framework, I'll give you a history lesson. So this is AI in the 60s and 70s. This is Socrates. Socrates is famous for inspiring the Socratic method. If I say to you that Socrates is a man, and all men are mortal, I can infer new knowledge. I can infer that Socrates is mortal. And AI in the 60s and 70s was writing down lots of things that we know about the world to try to infer new knowledge. And it didn't really work, it didn't really scale. This is now having a renaissance. It's called agentic computing. We'll talk about this later. In the 80s and 90s, a new type of AI came along that's modeled on how our brains work. This is the brain of a bumblebee. My PhD 20 years ago was trying to model the brain of a bumblebee in a machine. Bumblebees have 1 million brain cells. Their brains can fit on the end of a needle. They do amazing things. They navigate 3D worlds. They talk to each other. They solve problems. They don't handle Windows very well. But ultimately, bumblebees are very smart, and it was impossible to model 1 million neurons in a machine 20 years ago. Now we can model billions of neurons, and we currently call these large language models. Now, large language models are really good at knowing things about the world. They're really good at telling you what they know about the world through imagery and text. They're not good at making predictions. They're not good at making complex decisions. This is not a panacea to solve all problems across our organization. That said, they are getting smarter. 7 years ago, large language models behaved a little bit like toddlers. They regurgitated some words. Most of it didn't make sense. 3 years ago, ChatGPT was launched, and arguably, it was like an intoxicated graduate. 50% of what ChatGPT comes out with is nonsense. That said, it is now graduating to like a master's level, rudimentary reasoning. This year, we'll probably see a PhD level where you can give it a complex problem. It'll break that problem down and solve the problem. 18 months later, we'll probably have a postdoc, something that can do science. And by the end of this decade, we'll have a professor in our pocket, an AI that can come up with new hypotheses, new ideas, and solve those problems in ways that human beings can't. We're going to also put wrappers around these AIs. We're going to call them agents. Agents are not things that just have agency. The power of agents are things that are able to talk to each other to infer new knowledge. The power of agents are a concept called multi-agent reasoning. It's a concept that isn't a year old, it's been around for the past 70 years. But if you've got one piece of information here about an audience and another piece of information, by getting those agents to collaborate, they can come up with new insights that are valuable to your organization. So again, I look at AI through applications, not through definitions, and I believe there are 6 types of frictions or applications that exist across any industry that can be we can apply AI to. I'll try to use marketing as an example. So I know I poo-poo task automation, but the fact is if you use simple algorithms, you can replace repetitive, mundane, structured tasks, freeing people up from those tasks to do more important, impactful things. You can get a long way with using very, very simple algorithms. Of course, we're all now in the business of content generation, and I would argue large language models give everybody the ability to create any generic content. The battleground isn't creating generic content. The battleground is creating brand-specific, production-grade, differentiated content. And just to geek out very, very quickly, there are broadly 4 ways of making a brain smart. The first way is by better prompting, asking it better questions, but it's only going to give you the answers bounded by its knowledge. The second way is a concept called ragging. It's a terrible name. You want to give that intoxicated graduate your brand guidelines, your written copy, your tone of voice, and just like an intoxicated graduate, that will get to about 50% good. The second way is taking that brain and turning it into an expert. Now, we know how long it takes humans to become experts. It takes years of training and trial and error. There are only some models that you can tune and train to become experts. In WPP, we call these brand brains. The goal of a brand brain is to produce brand-specific, production-grade content. We use an agentic approach. We build agents that are experts at your brand guidelines, your tone of voice, your written copy, your imagery, your company values. And just like in the real world, you get all of these different agents collaborating and communicating to get to something greater than the sum of the parts. Okay, the power of agents is multi-agent collaboration, multi-agent reasoning. The previous talk talked about this, which is large language models are not just good at recreating creating content, they're good at recreating how people perceive content. For the first time ever, we can build brains that represent audiences that can recreate how people think and feel about things. If I show you an ad or a policy, historically I didn't know what goes on in your mind and body. For the first time ever, we can recreate those signals that now allows us to create better content, but also now allow us to more accurately predict activation. And unlike brand brains, where the complexity is how you tune and train and pipeline these technologies, the differentiator for audience brains is data. Historically, in marketing, there's been an impulse to collect people's names, addresses, dates of birth, gender. Who you are and where you live is a proxy for how you perceive something. How you perceive an ad or a policy will depend on the time of the day, the weather, whether you've just had a coffee, how well your football team played at the weekend, whether you've just fallen in love. Understanding the data that you need to build behavioral representations of audiences is a differentiator, not personal identification. Insight extraction is what people called AI 4 years ago. You already know my opinion. Giving human beings better insights doesn't lead to better decisions. The power of machine learning is actually not making predictions. The power of machine learning is explaining those predictions. So if I show you an ad with a black cat, I can predict the clicks and the likes and the sales. But machine learning can say, Daniel, if you change that from a black cat to a ginger cat, you're going to get more clicks, likes, and sales because that person likes Garfield. It's a terrible example. But the point is, machine learning can surface insights from data in ways that human beings can't. We can use those insights to make better decisions. Decision making, as I mentioned, is hard. Let me explain why. Imagine you have 5 pieces of content to allocate to 5 channels, or 5 people to allocate to 5 jobs. There are 5 factorial, 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 possible solutions to allocate 5 pieces of content to 5 channels. Let's make the problem a little bit more complicated. I've got 15 pieces of content to allocate to 15 channels. There are now 1 trillion possible solutions. To expect a human to solve this problem, we are wasting our time. Industry have problems of this size. Here are 500 pieces of content to allocate to 5 channels. This is how many solutions there are. And just to put this number into context, this is how many atoms there are in the universe. Once you reach about 60 things you have to consider, 60 pieces of content to allocate to channels, or 60 people to allocate to work, there are more solutions than there are atoms in the universe. Solving this problem is not machine learning, it's not generative AI, it's optimization. It's a completely different field in computer science. WPP have to push thousands of pieces of content across thousands of channels every second of every day. And doing that well is extremely hard. The final category is human augmentation. So a few years ago, I'll be talking about how exoskeletons, cybernetics can make ourselves faster, better, stronger. One of the things that I've been doing inside WPP for some time is creating digital twins of employees. Taking a large language model, training that large language model on your email, your calendar, your feedback, and then asking the digital you, if I put you on this project, will you work well? If I put you on this team, will you thrive? And that sounds creepy, but it's actually being embraced by the employees because they feel like their digital twin represents them better than 5 numbers in a HR database. What's really exciting is that we're not only creating digital twins of employees, you're all creating digital twins of your personal selves. Most people now use AI for therapy, so you're telling it your hopes, your dreams, your desires. At some point, you will give it agency. You'll give your AI agency, purchasing power. We as a marketing community need to figure out not only how to market to human beings, we need to figure out how to market to AIs. And by the way, I think AIs are going to be better at purchasing things than we do. So this framework allows you to navigate this complex world of AI safety, security, ethics, and governance. There's a huge amount of misinformation associated with these words. There are 3 questions I ask myself when implementing AI. The first one is the intent appropriate? Is it the right thing to do? There are people that have rebranded themselves as AI ethicists. I would argue there's no such thing as AI ethics. The difference between human beings and AIs is that human beings have intent. AIs don't have intent, and it's the intent that needs to get scrutinized from the ethics perspective. The second question is, are my algorithms explainable? The difference really between software and AI is AI tends to be opaque in terms of how it makes its decision. If you could make them explainable, most of these words go away. They become governable, transparent, auditable. And the final question you need to ask yourself is not what happens if my AI goes wrong. You have to ask yourself, what happens if my AI goes very right? For the first time ever, AI can overachieve the goal we've given it, and it can actually cause harm elsewhere in the supply chain. There's a human bias called homophily, which is that we tend to trust and like people that look like us. So if we let AI loose to optimize marketing, you probably end up in a world of you selling to you. Now that might be very good for business, but it might be enforcing bias and bigotry and social bubbles. So we have a duty of care to think about what happens if AI goes very right. So my job is to figure out how do we innovate? The faster we can innovate, the more adaptive we are, the more intelligent we are. I love Steve Jobs' definition of innovation. He said, innovation is creativity that ships. And for me, the most important word in this definition is the word that. That is generating ideas and getting them to the point where somebody's willing to pay for them. That process is long and hard and painful. AI can make that a lot shorter. I think there are 3 things that differentiate a business in the world of AI. The first is data. If you have data that contains insights that's more useful than your competitors, then you have an advantage. It's data that makes the AI smart. The second is talent. If you want to build differentiated AI solutions, you need to have differentiated AI talent. In WPP, we have about 300 deep AI experts. And by the way, it's not easy to attract and maintain deep mind level talent. So really be honest with yourself. Can you actually build differentiated solutions? And finally, and now this is Mark Reed, the CEO of WPP, it's leadership, it's you. It's making sure that you're placing the right bets. What tends to happen is we get very excited about emerging technologies. We then apply those technologies to solving the wrong problems. We blame the technology, we call it a bubble, but the reality is that human beings are not very good at applying the right technologies to the right problems. Don't worry about productivity. Focus on applying AI to solving problems that are going to differentiate your supply chain, not that's going to increase productivity. That will be solved by your cloud providers. Focus on differentiating your supply chain. We're moving from AIs to agents, and agents will have agency, but as you know, the power of agents is collaborating with each other. Those agents will reach the real world. We're going to start to see a robotic revolution. Now, there's a massive amount of scrutiny around large language models. They require huge amounts of energy, data, they're very slow at learning. Your brain operates on the power of a light bulb. You learn very, very quickly. I only have to say that's a clicker once before you know what a clicker is. You don't need to see thousands of examples of clickers. There's some new emerging technologies that are coming out of academia based on how our brains work. These are going to enable us to create much smarter, much more agile, adaptive models that are essentially going to spawn the robotic revolution. And I think it will also spawn consciousness, which we can talk about later on. And so neuroscience and neuromarketing, how brains work, how people perceive things, how we think, how we can persuade people is going to become more and more important. Let's talk about the end of the world. So you might have all heard the word singularity. Singularity comes from physics. It's a point in time that we can't see beyond. And it was adopted by the AI community to refer to the technological singularity, which is the point in time where we build a brain 1,000,000 times smarter than us. I think there are at least 6 big questions that we're facing as a species over the next 5, 10 years, and I've tried to use this framework to capture them. First one is the political singularity, a post-truth world, a world where people no longer know what is true. AI, misinformation, bot deepfakes have challenged our political foundations, but they're also now challenging the fabric of our reality. Mark Reed was cloned last year. Somebody tried to use his clone to commit fraud. It's very, very now easy to clone people, and I think we need to mitigate that risk. And by the way, I think we can solve that problem. AI is increasing consumption. We know that consumption gives people access to goods and services that typically enrich their lives. We know it's putting pressure on our planetary boundary. We know there are people that overconsume. If you want a gold-plated Lamborghini, you probably also need a therapist. But the fact is, if you apply algorithms in the right way across your supply chain, we can massively reduce the amount of energy that we need to run this planet. Every project that I've done over the past 18 years, we reduced the amount of carbon by 25% and unlock more capacity. We could easily halve the amount of energy and unlock more capacity and run this planet. The social singularity is not my expertise, but there are scientists that believe there are people alive today that don't have to die. AI is advancing medicine. It's able to monitor ourselves and clean ourselves out, and it will completely change how people behave once we realize there are people amongst us that won't have to die. In fact, I just signed up to a website for $5 a week. If I die now, they'll freeze me and take me to Sweden. They don't know how to unfreeze me yet. But the point is, for $5 a week, you could all potentially cheat death. The technological singularity is when we build a brain 1,000,000 times smarter than us, and we become the second most intelligent species on the planet. My community felt this wasn't going to happen for another 40 years. We think it's now going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years. My advice is that when superintelligence comes, look busy, be nice to each other, and hopefully it will bugger off to a different dimension. I'm a little bit worried about this actually, and so I've just started a company that I've spun out from WPP to solve machine consciousness. The hypothesis is if we build a conscious superintelligence, it will have more empathy, sympathy for things that are conscious. Anyway, the legal singularity is when surveillance becomes ubiquitous. AI is becoming really good at understanding how people perceive things. We are in the business of not just perception, we are in the business of influence. And it's getting really good, and we need to make sure we do that safely and responsibly, and also mitigate bad actors from using these technologies to accumulate more wealth and more power. And again, I think we can solve this problem. My favorite singularity is coined by a very good friend of mine called Callum Chase. This is a point in time where we automate the majority of human labor. Now, for the past 18 years, I've been using AI to free people from mundane tasks. Those people have not lost their jobs. They've gone on to do more important, impactful things. I think for the next 5 years, we're going to see a Cambrian explosion of new innovations. Jobs will be displaced and disrupted, but there'll be new opportunities for people to contribute. Beyond 5 years, nobody knows what they're talking about. Okay? And to give you the 2 extremes of the argument, the one extreme of the argument is that if we can free up whole jobs, we probably will. So the capitalistic model to reduce costs, increase profits, means we'll either stop hiring or we'll remove people. If that happens very quickly, and our economies won't be able to rebalance, it will lead to social unrest. And I genuinely believe we need to lean into that problem. 4-day working week, UBI, whatever. We need some mechanisms to mitigate that risk. The counter-argument to this is that by removing people from jobs, removing friction, you can bring the cost of the creation and dissemination of goods down so much that they become free. Food, healthcare, energy, transport, education, it becomes abundant. So imagine being born into a world where you don't have to do paid work, but everything you need to survive and thrive as a human is free. Now, people say, Daniel, what would I do if I didn't have a job? A job defines who I am as a human being. I know lots of people who don't have jobs. They're not sitting at home bored and depressed. Most of them are using their time to try and contribute to humanity. And we can't do this right now, but if I asked you, what would you do if you were economically free and you didn't have to do any paid work and everything was abundant, what would you do? Golf, travel, indulge in your hobbies, read, spend time with your friends and family. There's more people playing chess today, by the way, than ever before, even though AI can play chess better than us for the past 30 years. If I keep pushing you hard enough, you'll say the same thing, which is you want to do something that contributes somehow to humanity. I think everybody has an innate desire to do all of those nice things, but actually wants to contribute to humanity. And I think the promise of AI is unlocking people from those economic constraints. I'm going to close by saying it's not good enough for organizations just to have a strong, profitable business. You need to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, you're not going to attract AI talent, and at some point, you're not going to attract customers. I joined WPP despite knowing nothing about marketing because I believe in their purpose. It's to use the power of creativity, human creativity, to make the world better. And I believe a better world is, until you convince me otherwise, is a world where everybody is economically free to use their creativity to make the world better for other people. So on that note, I'm going to stop. And if you want questions, I'll be at the back. Thank you for listening, folks.